You're listening to Big World Network.
Bloodshot Buck, Season 2, Episode 8. Written by W.H. Wood and Mitch K. Allan. Read by Willow Wood. The light strips didn't come on that morning, but Ava woke up at 5 a.m. anyway. Habit. She groaned into her pillow and rubbed her legs over the mattress sheet, like kicking her feet through soft water. No obligations today. Good thing, too. She felt hot in the face, and heavy from all the intensive TG exercises. Ava, you awake? No, she moaned, sorry that their beds weren't like bunks from back home. She would have given James a playful kick through the bed slats. As it was, she stared at the blackened metal slate above her. James laughed a little. Pushing the curtain back from her cubby bunk, Ava activated the blue light strips and rolled off her mattress and onto the floor. She pressed her cheek to the cool linoleum and blinked at the bizarre shapes she spotted through the table legs. What was that? She worked harder to make her foggy eyes focus. You look like a beached salmon, said James from above. I feel like one. That blurry silhouette, it didn't fit with what Ava expected to be there. James, what is that? Over by Gibbon's curtain. I can't quite tell. Huh? Oh, that's his arm, you muppet. Is your eyesight that bad? The lighting doesn't help. Pushing up off the floor, enjoying the rush of heat down her muscled arms, Ava dusted herself off and looked again at Michael's arm, where it dangled from under his curtain. It seemed obvious now. She even noticed his fingers twitch, still deep asleep. Activating the main lights, Ava set about getting ready for the showers, chatting to James about his bizarro dream. It involved a fighter jet, but without the jet framework and just the pilot's chair. She threw James his morning medication and tugged a brush through her long hair as she listened, all the while watching Michael's hand. It twitched more than before. Was he having a nightmare? Did their talk not stir him at all? Do you think he's all right? Ava asked James, stowing her brush away. What? James peered over the table from his position in bed. Hey, Gibbon! What did the land chimp say to the space chimp? He paused for effect. Nothing, because they only have space gibbons. There was no response, and Ava gave James a boorish look. Don't quit your day job, that's my advice. I just woke up. Cut me some slack. Shutting her locker, Ava went over and gave Michael's palm a poke. Gibbon, she said softly. You're right, mate. I'm gonna peek in your curtain. Take your hand out your pants. Nice, said James. A sliver of light fell across Michael's face as Ava looked in on him, and her chest constricted. Ava threw the curtain back and dropped down onto the edge of his mattress. Gibbon! Gibbon, what's wrong? He stared at her with watery, bloodshot eyes. His pillow was drenched in sweat, and his skin was flushed in splotches of yellow and red. His bare chest rose and fell as he tried to speak, but nothing got past his lips. Ava heard James's feet slap against the floor as he jumped down from his bed and rushed to Michael's bedside. He took one look at Michael and tried to compose himself, then said, He's clearly overheating. Fever, probably. Symptoms. Gibbs, you're susceptible to some kind of blood poisoning, right? Do you think it's all this minimal grav work we've been doing? Ava asked.
Who knows?
You probably don't, Gibbon?
Said James, his tone overly cheery. Come on, I'll get him up and carry him downstairs. You alert Cosmi. Are you sure that you should? Ava looked over James's thick arms, unaided by metal hydraulics. James huffed and ducked his head into Michael's bunk, filling up the walkway with his broad form. I'm not a daisy. Quick, let's do this. It's not your strength I'm worried about. He's sick, and you're... I took my medication. I won't get infected that easy.
But James, will you just do as I say?
Ava glanced at the napkin with Remus Lance's signature on it, tacked up beside Michael's homemade poster, before sliding over the table and dashing out the room. She raced down the polished stairs until she reached the intercom by the front doors and explained the situation to a nonplussed Cosmi. James soon lumbered down the stairs with Michael over his shoulder. They settled on the floor, waiting for assistance, with Michael propped up between them. Don't get comfortable lounging in my arms, James told him, voice loud and playful. I know what you're thinking. Ava saw a smile flicker over Michael's lips, his watery eyes closing. The liquid escaped like tears. Or perhaps that's what they were. She felt a sharp tug in her chest, knowing the loss of Daniel must still hurt him. Fear wormed into her gut, half expecting to see blood cough up past Michael's lips. Breathing's easier like this, Michael whispered. Oh shit, he can talk again, James said. A medical team arrived in good time, and they set Michael onto a stretcher. Ava instantly recognized one of the younger girls among them as Clara Grayson, her perfect brown curls tied up on top of her head. Ava tried hard to avoid eye contact. Will he be okay? Ava asked one of the team. Clara's head shot up, recognizing her voice. Ava ignored her. We've seen these signs before, said one of the paramedics. It's probably sepsis. If he'd gone unnoticed another hour, it could have been a lot worse. Don't worry for now. We'll pump him full of antibiotics and take good care of him. Out the corner of her eye, Ava noticed James nod at Clara. The girl offered him a quick, coy smile. As the paramedics rushed Michael out the door and into the waiting transport outside, Clara hung back. James and Ava followed her out onto the building's chilly titanium steps. If you have time later, come and see me, Clara said, gaze fixed on James. We'll get your files sorted out. With a shrewd glance at Ava, the girl jogged off to the transport, and Ava and James watched them go. You know that Clara girl? Ava said. Kind of, James replied. Her mother prescribed my medicine cards, and she calls me in for checkups. Science department. What's wrong with your files? James sighed and rolled his eyes. Her mother's come under some serious fire lately from the Court of Just. She signed for a box or something, and apparently it's connected to that civilian who ran away with NENI-LOHI. It's a load of horse shit, whatever's going on. So, for the time being, Clara's taking over her mother's post and seeing to my checkups. Ava nodded in understanding. She wriggled her bare feet and absently rubbed her hands over her stomach. Wearing only sweatpants and a thermal bra, staring out over the quiet road, Ava almost felt civilian. She saw the sun in the distance beyond the Atshield, like a tiny orb of flame on a black canvas, too weak to heat her skin, too far away to brighten the streets. She stared at the bluish Atshield, pretending it could pass for the colourful atmosphere above Earth. I'm going swimming, she announced. You coming? James shrugged his shoulders. I'm sure not staying here. Ava stretched her arms above her head, took a few deep breaths, and launched off the side of the pool. She pierced the surface of the water and swept out her arms, embracing the cool emptiness. It soothed her head and lightened every ache in her body, like her dreams of anti-gravity. Ava relished the feeling of water swirling down her legs and tugging at her hair as she kicked forward and re-emerged halfway down the pool. At once, the deep, watery silence was replaced by sounds of the gym as it echoed from the depths of the practice building. James's form rippled towards her, like a giant stingray skimming along ocean sands. She watched with bleary vision, staying afloat with ease as he passed beneath her, when two hands grabbed hold of her ankles. "Hey!" Ava managed a quick breath before he yanked her under. She thrashed for a moment, while James swam off like his life depended on it. Two could play at that game. When she finally caught up to him, Ava lunged forward and pushed down on his shoulders, but her hands slipped off with little effect. Ava's grin faded as she realized she might actually hurt him if she was too rough, and fell back from the chase. James glanced over his shoulder. "Giving up? Yeah, you win this time." They spent the first 20 minutes in relative silence, swimming lengths up and down the pool. Ava watched him, prepared to tell him off if he got too carried away and overworked himself. He took 5 different medications every morning to combat his aplastic anemia. 1 to stimulate his bone marrow, 3 to suppress his immune system, and another to prevent infections. The drugs affecting his immune system increased the risk of him developing leukemia, while those that stimulated his bone marrow helped him avoid the need for blood transfusions. A tricky thing to facilitate on a colony out in the fringes of space. As he splashed toward her on his 30th length, Ava seized his arm to keep him from firing off again. "Stop," she said. "I can hear you're going breathless." "It's just normal exertion," he protested. "You listen to me for a change, mate." James looked at the far end longingly, his chest heaving, but nodded his head. They took a break at the shallower end of the pool, bobbing side by side. "I wonder how Gibbon's doing," Ava said, stroking her palms across the water's surface. She'd started to kid herself that they were past the point of serious internal complications, but she supposed they would never be in the safe zone. "He'll be all right," James said. "He just needs a life-size cutout of Justicat Lancer by his bedside. That'll fix him up." Ava laughed, despite the weight in her chest. "Heard anything else about your sister?" James added. "Nah, I think that message was just fluke. Delayed traffic or something." He sighed and gave her a sidelong glance. "Ah well. Big sisters, right? Always running off for some batshit reason." Ava stared at him, noticed the subtleness of his accent again as it echoed off the water. She couldn't tell the flavour of it, only that it never seemed to exist unless she paid very close attention. Her gaze fell on the droplets of water glistening on his shoulders. "You have an older sister?" she asked. James's mouth tightened into a sad sneer. Head jerked as if to stop himself from nodding. "She's dead." The curt reply hit Ava, and she gasped. "It's all right," he hurried on. "It happened years ago. Don't feel bad about it. I was a kid and she was—" He shook his head and stared up at the ceiling. Unable to find the right words to describe his obvious dislike for her, James shrugged his shoulders. "She's dead, or at least, it doesn't matter." "Yeah, right, it doesn't." Ava grimaced, guilt twisting her gut for having gone on about her own sister the other day during a training exercise. That had to have been above and beyond distracting for him. "You got any other siblings?" she asked. "Nope, just me and my old man. He was a Marine too, but retired a couple of years before I signed up." Ava studied his face, the warm shape of his eyes and the deep bronze of his skin. Did he have a Hispanic bloodline? She couldn't tell. James kept everything so close to his chest, and it frustrated her that she couldn't puzzle him out. Not knowing what else to say, Ava went for her usual tactic of sticking her foot right down the rabbit's mouth. "You're a pain in the ass, Shirley. It's like getting blood from a stone." She scraped her massive hair over her shoulders so she didn't have to look at him. Ava started to feel chilly, and she shivered as James draped his arm behind her on the side of the pool. "Sorry about that," he said gently. She peeked up at him. He did look sorry, frown in full effect again. "Don't frown," she mumbled, watching water glide down his neck. James was so close to her. Best not to meet his eye. The accidental brush of his arm against hers was knotting her stomach into tremors of heat. There were rules against this sort of feeling. It made her tremble. Burned her cheeks the harder she tried to remind herself, "No fraternizing in your squad. No fraternizing in your squad." She shuddered even more at the conflicting sensations of cold water and the heat in her face. Passions would ruin everything. Sterling. Plain old Sterling. Definitely attractive and frustratingly withdrawn Marine who outranked her and talked way too loud when his ego got the better of him. Not interesting. "Wow, you're shaking pretty badly," he said. "I hope it's not a fever." Bloody felt like one. Fever of the moron. He dropped a hand on her shoulder, and the heat burst further beneath her skin. "Let's start swimming again. That'll—" Static and ethereal whispers crackled in the back of Ava's head. Blood roared in her ears, and a soothing sense of concern permeated her veins. It overrode the hot tremors inside her chest, a twisting, tangled web of kindness and unease. Beneath this, she sensed an eagerness to hide, to change, to avoid. Gasping, Ava drew away, and James yanked his hand back like he'd been branded with hot iron. There was no mistaking it this time. It was no dream. She stared at him, eyes wide. "Did you feel that?" she gushed. James splashed himself with water and rubbed it over his face. He was grinning. He was speechless, he was nodding, and he was grinning like an idiot. "What? What's so funny?" The soothing, uneasy tangle of sensations ebbed away, replaced by the same fiery heat she'd felt a moment ago. James's grin touched his eyes, deepening the smile lines there. "Yeah, I felt that," he said at last. "Was that you?" It dawned on Ava why he was laughing. Embarrassment shot through her chest and sank deep into the pit of her stomach. Somehow they had exchanged feelings, and he knew exactly what had been on her mind. Ava buried her inflamed face in her hands. "Oh no," she groaned, and sank beneath the surface of the water. It helped lessen the burn in her cheeks, but the irritating, molten embarrassment wouldn't go away. She blew out a stream of bubbles, but that didn't lighten her mood either. She heard the bass thrum of water being shifted as James waded closer. Well, sulking at the bottom of a pool wouldn't do. Ava stood up again and came face to face with him. Nope, she'd rather hide. Folding her arms, Ava stared at one of his sculpted arms instead.
What do you think that was?
She asked, teeth chattering. James shook his head. Dunno. Should we tell someone? Ava snorted.
Yeah, right. Like it's not bad enough I'm on eyeball watch. If someone finds out I'm hearing frequencies and exchanging hormones, they'll...
She shrugged, not actually sure what would happen to her, but no one had mentioned crackling or chemical osmosis in the synth complications and strengths module. It couldn't be normal. Perhaps you're right, he said. Just be careful, okay? She met his gaze and suppressed a shiver. God, she wished they were both wearing proper clothes. But then she thought of him rolling out of bed in the mornings, dishevelled and half-dressed, or getting back from training, and the way he yanked off his shirt before throwing it into his locker, and Ava wanted to smack herself across the face. If you feel sick or anything, don't hide it, James added. He folded his arms, making him look broader than normal. It would be great if, you didn't die. Ava couldn't stop herself from grinning.
I'm with you on that.
How do you feel now? A cheeky grin touched his lips.
Not how you think!
She splashed him with water and then rubbed her face hard. I didn't say anything, he laughed. I was just asking. Ava resisted the urge to turn about and swim off, gripped to the spot like James had a magnetic pull. Then, you didn't. His hands unfolded and slipped down to his hips. I didn't what? She cursed and dived under the water again, swimming out in a wide arc. James was just rubbing it in, now he'd experienced how hot and bothered she felt. Jerk. Hopefully he'd forget.
Please let him forget.
But as she grazed across the tiles at the bottom of the pool, Ava knew she wouldn't forget the way his sincerity and vague sense of disquiet had seeped into her consciousness. What was twisting him up inside? A loud, muffled voice trembled into the depths of the pool. Did James ever stop shouting? Pushing against the tiles, Ava shot up to the surface again. Her comment died on her tongue as the voice coming from the speakers killed her last shred of giddiness. It hissed and rolled with a thick Catharian accent, booming off the hard surfaces on maximum volume.
This is not how our blood is meant to be used,
it said.
You're corrupting our heritage and poisoning our essence. It will end. Yes, yes. This is a red day, starting with your science labs.
The last few words were underscored by a distant, thunder-like boom, and Ava felt the water tremor. Her eyes fell on James, who still stood in the shallow end, his every limb tense and his jaw clenched. The science labs were inside the hospital. Did that mean... She started, but a deafening rumble shook the walls. The water revolted and tugged her down, filling her mouth with water. Desperate not to let panic take over, Ava splashed her way to James. He'd know what to do. He'd think of something. He'd take charge and lead the way into whatever shitstorm was brewing outside. When she got close, his hand landed on her shoulder and shoved her down. A jolt of static, a passing of sensations. Regret, anger, fear. So much fear, in fact. He was terrified. A second later, he dragged her up and gripped her arms tight.
Sorry! Are you alright?
He half shouted. The lights went out. Total darkness.
by Kevin MacLeod.
You're listening to Big World Network.